My brother Leo didn't even offer me a glass of water when I arrived at his engagement gala. Instead, he shoved a rusted pipe wrench into my hands and hissed, "The garbage disposal in the kitchen is backing up. Fix it and stay in the servants' quarters." My fiancé's father is the CEO of Blackwood Holdings, and if he sees my grease monkey brother ruining the aesthetic, the wedding is off. He saw me as a repairman, a shameful blemish on the high society life he was trying to fake. He didn't realize that the aesthetic he was so worried about was funded by my dirty hands. I wasn't just a mechanic. I was the anonymous majority, shareholder of Vantage Industrial, the global powerhouse. His future father-in-law was begging for a $50 million merger to save his dying company. As Leo walked away to toast his elite future, I pulled out my phone, wiped a smear of grease off the screen, and sent a single text to my board. Kill the Blackwood deal. No negotiations. I didn't get loud, and I didn't cause a scene. I simply assessed the liability and eliminated it. While my brother was busy hiding me in the kitchen, I was busy ensuring that by the time he popped the champagne, he'd be marrying into a family that was worth absolutely nothing. Before the story goes any further, take a moment, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment, and tell me where you're watching from and what time it is in your world right now. To understand how my brother Leo became so comfortable treating me like a servant in his own home, you have to understand the toxic hierarchy of the Miller family. Since childhood, our parents, Richard and Elena, had operated under a service paradox. They loved the lifestyle my labor provided, but they were deeply ashamed of the grease and sweat it took to earn it. Leo was the golden child, the one groomed for the spotlight, while I was the machine in the basement that kept the lights on for everyone else. I spent 15 years building Vantage Industrial from a single-bay garage into a global powerhouse that specialized in high-end machinery and industrial logistics. I was the strategic risk analyst of my own life, meticulously building a fortune while keeping my face off the Forbes lists to avoid the shallow drama of high society. My parents called my success dirty work. They beamed when Leo managed a boutique art gallery, which I secretly subsidized to the tune of $10,000 a month, but they never mentioned that my dirty hands were the ones paying for their country club memberships and their luxury vacations. Leo lived in a mirror paradox. He only valued people who reflected the version of himself he wanted the world to see. Polished, wealthy, and untouchable. Because I often showed up to family dinners in a work truck with oil under my fingernails. I was a crack in his reflection. He didn't see a brother who had sacrificed his youth to ensure the family never faced a bill they couldn't pay. He saw a peasant who made his old money aesthetic look fake. The betrayal reached its peak when Leo started dating Chloe Blackwood, the daughter of Arthur Blackwood, a man who treated people as ATM machines rather than human beings. Chloe was obsessed with vibes and social standing, and Leo was terrified that I would ruin his chance to marry into the Blackwood dynasty. He began a whisper campaign against me within the family. He told our parents that my unrefined presence would cause Arthur to pull out of the $50 million merger deal that Leo's own gallery and his future inheritance depended on. I actually overheard them huddled around the mahogany dining table one evening, planning my erasure. "He's just too industrial." "Dad," Leo had whispered, his voice carrying that familiar edge of unearned confidence. "We can't have him at the engagement gala. Arthur thinks my family is blue blood. If he sees Sam in his work boots, he'll realize we're just new money with dirt under our nails. We'll tell him Sam is away on a mental health retreat and have him come in early to fix the plumbing issues before the guests arrive." My parents didn't defend me. They nodded in sympathetic unison. My mother even joked about how I smelled like a gas station and how it was for the best. They were banking on my conditioning, betting that I was too loyal, too desperate for their approval to ever say no. They didn't realize that as I stood in the hallway, listening to them liquidate my personhood for the sake of a brand deal, I wasn't feeling the heat of anger. I was feeling the cold clarity of a spreadsheet balancing out. For years, I had been the invisible wallet, the one who intercepted their financial consequences. I had paid for Leo's luxury car, his gallery's lease, and the very house they were currently sitting in. But looking at them now, I saw the trap of normalizing cruelty. They didn't see a person. They saw a resource. And you don't ask a resource for permission. You just take from it until it's empty. As I walked away from the door that night, I didn't stop the subsidy. I didn't cause a scene. I simply opened my laptop and pulled up the confidential files for the Blackwood merger. I saw the raw, unfiltered panic in Arthur. Blackwood's internal reports: he was drowning in debt and needed Vantage Industrial to survive. He was desperate for my greasy money to save his elite reputation. I realized then that the safe and boring brother they mocked was the one who held the kill switch to their entire reality. I arranged my features into a mask of holiday warmth, ready to play the role of the repairman one last time, knowing that the elite world they were so desperate to join was already a hollow shell, and I was the one about to blow the dam. The tension in the kitchen of Leo's rented estate didn't simmer. It boiled over with the frantic, entitled rattle of people who think the world owes them a standing ovation. While the sounds of a string quartet drifted from the ballroom, I was on my knees on the cold tile, elbow deep in the aesthetic disaster of a backed-up garbage disposal. I had been working for 40 minutes. The smell of rotting food and expensive champagne mingling in the humid air. My brother Leo burst through the swinging doors, his face a mask of rising panic that he tried to hide under his tailored tuxedo. He didn't ask if I was okay. He didn't thank me for coming in 4 hours before my own banishment to fix the plumbing. Instead, he hissed at me because a smear of grease had touched the hem of his silk trousers. "Hurry up, Sam. Arthur is asking about the logistics of the merger," Leo commanded, his voice tight with the expectation of service. He's been checking his phone every 5 minutes. The Vantage Industrial Board was supposed to send the final approval letter an hour ago. If they back out now, this house, this party, it all disappears. He looked at me with profound distaste, treating me like a prop for his immaculate vibes that had suddenly malfunctioned. Without the invisible wallet of my secret, corporate dividends to smooth over his credit card declines, Leo was beginning to crumble. I didn't argue. I pulled a piece of jagged metal out of the disposal, a discarded silver oyster fork that someone had carelessly dropped. "The merger is a complex risk, Leo," I said, my voice as flat as the stainless steel prep table. Maybe they realized that Blackwood Holdings is a sinking ship. Maybe they saw that Arthur treats his employees like ATM machines. Leo laughed, a sharp, ugly sound that echoed off the industrial appliances. "What do you know about risk, Sam? You fix pipes. You deal with grease. You don't understand the elite world. Now finish this and get out the back door before Chloe sees you. She told her father you were in a specialized facility for your condition. Don't make her a liar." He stormed back into the gala, leaving me in the shadows. I stood up, wiped my hands on a rag, and pulled my phone from my pocket. The mirror paradox was complete. He had used me as a servant while begging for my mercy under a different name. My internal risk assessment software was flashing red, not for my company, but for my family. I opened the secure portal for Vantage Industrial. There was a high-priority notification from my CEO, Marcus. "Sam, the Blackwood audit is a nightmare. They've been cooking the books for years. If we sign this $50 million merger, we're inheriting a corpse. Your call." I looked through the kitchen's porthole window. I saw my parents, Richard and Elena, laughing with Arthur Blackwood. They were basking in the glow of a man who looked at them with the same predatory hunger they had used on me for 15 years. They weren't a family. They were a collection of bad actors in a hostile environment. They had conditioned me since childhood to believe that my value lay solely in my utility. My success wasn't my achievement to be celebrated. It was a communal asset they hadn't liquidated yet. I didn't feel the heat of anger anymore. I felt the cold clarity of a demolition expert. I typed back to Marcus, "Decline the merger. Issue a formal press release, stating that Vantage Industrial found irreconcilable ethical and financial discrepancies in Blackwood Holdings. Do it now." I hit send. The power flip was officially in motion. As I was adjusting my wrench, I knew that in the ballroom, 300 phones were about to buzz. With a market notification, that would turn the elite gala into a funeral. Leo came back into the kitchen 5 minutes later, his face the color of ash. His phone was shaking in his hand. "The merger? It's dead," he whispered, looking at me as if I could somehow fix the economy like I fixed his sink. "Arthur is losing his mind. The investors are pulling out. Sam, you have to help me. You have savings, right? You have that dirty money from your shop? I need a loan, just $100,000, to cover the venue deposit, or they'll kick us out in front of everyone." I looked at him, and for the first time, I didn't feel the weight of his expectations. I reached behind my neck and untied my work apron. I laid it on the counter, folding it corner to corner, edge to edge, the discipline of the kitchen. "I'm clocking out, Leo," I said, my voice quiet but cutting through his panic. "I've spent 15 years being your machine in the basement, but the machine just submitted its resignation. I'm not your storage unit for failure anymore." I walked past him toward the back door, leaving the silver oyster fork on the counter, a symbol of the wealth he had stolen and the rot he had ignored. Behind me, the Gala was beginning to scream, but out here the air was finally clean. The power flip didn't happen in the kitchen. It happened in the center of the ballroom, under the weight of 1,000 crystal chandelier. I didn't leave through the back door as Leo had commanded. Instead, I walked into the hallway, stripped off my grease-stained work shirt to reveal the tailored, charcoal gray silk shirt I had worn underneath, and adjusted my watch, a piece that cost more than Leo's entire art gallery. I wasn't the repairman anymore. I was the architect of the wreckage. As I pushed through the heavy oak doors into the Gala, the atmosphere was thick with the scent of expensive perfume and raw, unfiltered panic. The string quartet had stopped playing. The elite guests were huddled in small groups, their faces illuminated by the blue light of their phones as they read the press. Release from Vantage Industrial. The 50 million merger was dead, and with it, the Blackwood legacy was dissolving in real time. I saw Arthur Blackwood standing in the center of the room, his face a dangerous shade of purple. He was screaming at my father, Richard, who looked like a man who had finally realized the floor was missing. "You told me your family was blue blood," Arthur roared. "You told me your sons were the future of industry, and now the CEO of Vantage, a man nobody has ever seen, just publicly called my company a corpse and an ethical nightmare." Leo rushed toward Arthur, his voice pitching into that desperate, wheedling tone I had heard 1,000 times. "Arthur, please. It's a mistake. My brother? He's a nobody, a mechanic. He has some savings, we can bridge the gap." I stepped into the light, the polished marble floor clicking under my boots. "The gap is 50 million, Leo," I said, my voice steady and cutting through the murmurs like a scalpel. "And I don't think my dirty money is going to be enough this time." The silence that followed was absolute. My mother, Elena, gasped, her hand flying to her throat as she stared at the man, standing where the peasant was supposed to be. Leo froze, his mouth hanging open as he looked at my clothes, my posture, and the cold clarity in my eyes. "Sam, what are you doing out here?" Leo hissed, trying to grab my arm to pull me back into the shadows. "I told you to stay in the kitchen. You're ruining everything." I didn't move. I let his hand slide off my arm as if he were nothing more than a minor inconvenience. At that moment, Arthur Blackwood's eyes locked onto mine. He didn't see a grease monkey. He saw the man from the rare, high-security boardroom photos he had studied for months. He saw the majority shareholder of the company that had just crushed his soul. "You," Arthur whispered, his voice trembling with a mix of horror and realization. "You're Sam Miller. You're the CEO of Vantage Industrial." The mirror paradox shattered. Leo's face crumpled as the reality hit him like a physical blow. The brother he had hidden, the man he had forced to fix his garbage disposal while guests mocked him, was the same man he had been begging for a $50 million favor. My parents stood paralyzed, realizing that the machine in the basement wasn't just keeping the lights on, it owned the entire building. "I didn't ruin your life, Leo," I said, looking him dead in the eye. "I just stopped being your mirror. I stopped intercepting the consequences of your own character. You told me I wasn't on brand for your elite life. I simply agreed. As of 10 minutes ago, I am no longer the guarantor for your gallery, your car, or this house." I turned to Arthur Blackwood, who was staring at me in shock. "And as for the merger, I don't buy corpses, Arthur, especially not ones that treat their family like trash." I walked out of the ballroom, leaving the elite world to choke on the dust of its own hubris. The fallout didn't stay in the ballroom. It moved into the sterile, high-ceilinged conference rooms of my corporate headquarters. Within 48 hours, the aesthetic my family had curated was under a forensic audit, because Leo and my parents had filed a desperate bad faith lawsuit claiming I had sabotaged the family estate and breached a fiduciary duty to support them. They forced my hand. They wanted to prove in court that my success was a communal asset. Instead, they opened the door for my legal team to show the world the receipts of their absolute parasitism. I sat at the head of the mahogany table, flanked by a legal team that cost more per hour than Leo's gallery made in a month. Across from me, my parents and Leo looked like they had aged a decade in 2 days. Leo had tried to dress for the part of the wronged visionary, a sharp navy suit meant to look professional, but the dark circles under his eyes told the truth. Without my invisible wallet to bridge his credit gaps, the bank had already flagged his gallery for immediate repossession. Mr. Miller, my lead counsel, Marcus said as he slid a thick, leather-bound binder across the table toward my father. In your filing, you claim that Sam, acted with malice to destroy the family's financial standing. However, these records show that for 15 years, Sam has been the sole source of liquidity for the entire Miller bloodline. We have the itemized logs of every $10,000 transfer made to keep your country club memberships active while your own accounts were in the red. We also have the lease agreements for Leo's gallery, all of which were signed by Sam as the primary guarantor. My father tried to summon his old bluster, but he looked like a man who had finally realized the floor was missing. He's our son. It was a family understanding. You can't just stop paying because your feelings were hurt. It wasn't a family understanding, Dad, I said, my voice cutting through his lies like a serrated knife. It was a hostage situation. You loved the status of the machine, but you called me a peasant because I had oil on my boots. You loved the luxury Leo projected, but you despised the producer who paid for it. You wanted to hide the repairman while begging the CEO for a $50 million miracle. Marcus then pulled out the kill shot, the debt acquisition files. Since Leo's gallery and your personal home were leveraged against loans that were recently sold to a secondary holding company, I should inform you that Vantage Industrial is that holding company. Sam doesn't just fund your life anymore. He owns your debt. Every cent you spent trying to look elite was borrowed from the very person you forced to fix your plumbing. Leo let out a raw sound of frustration, his face turning an ugly mottled red. You planned this. You bought our debt just to humiliate us. You're a sociopath, Sam. You're destroying your own family. I didn't destroy you, Leo, I replied, leaning forward so he could see the total lack of anger in my eyes. I just stopped being your safety net. I stopped intercepting the consequences of your own incompetence. You told the Blackwoods I was mentally unfit just to keep your merger alive. I simply proved that I'm the only one in this room with the mental faculty to run a business. As of 9 a.m. this morning, I have initiated the foreclosure process on the gallery and the estate. You are now freelance socialites with a $2 million liability and zero credit. My mother began to weep, but it wasn't for the loss of her son. It was for the lifestyle that was evaporating. The service paradox was complete. They had treated the provider like a servant until the servant walked away, and now they were left to realize that without the machine in the basement, the house of cards couldn't stand. I stood up, left the keys to the corporate vault on the table, and walked out. The legal war was over, but for the Millers, the silence of a bankrupt brand was just beginning. The silence that followed, the collapse of the Miller family, was the most expensive luxury I had ever owned. 6 months after the foreclosure, I stood on the balcony of my new headquarters overlooking the Tokyo skyline. The air here felt different, crisp, clean, and entirely devoid of the suffocating humidity of my brother's entitled expectations. I had finally retired from the job of being their savior. And for the first time in 15 years, my resources were irrevocably my own. A digital report landed in my inbox an hour ago, a final update from the private investigators I had hired to monitor the collateral damage. The elite world had moved on from Leo and the Blackwoods with a brutal, clinical speed. Chloe had left Leo the moment the foreclosure notice hit the front door, realizing that without the Miller machinery, he was just a man. With a collection of expensive suits and a bankrupt gallery, my parents were now living in a small, 2-bedroom rental in a town where nobody knew their name or cared about their blue blood fabrications. My father was working a desk job at a local logistics firm, the very industrial work he once called beneath him, and my mother was selling her designer jewelry just to keep the lights on. Leo had sent a dozen emails, alternating between frantic apologies and venomous accusations. "How can you watch us struggle?" he wrote. "We are your blood." I didn't delete them. I simply archived them. In the past, those words would have been daggers of guilt, but today, they felt like junk mail from a company that had gone out of business. I had submitted my resignation from the role of the invisible wallet, and the position was permanently closed. The glow wasn't about the $50 million saved by killing the merger or the global expansion of Vantage Industrial. It was the peace of knowing that I no longer had to hide my hands. I looked down at my palms. No oil, no grease, but still the same. Hands that built a kingdom, while my family tried to bury the architect. They tried to hide me in the kitchen, so I gave them the only thing they had truly earned, the cold, hard reality of their own incompetence. The machine in the basement was gone, and the house of cards had finally turned to dust.